50,000 years ago, the Earth was not ruled by one kind of human. It was a crowded world, wild, unpredictable, and filled with creatures that looked almost like us, but were not quite the same. If you could travel back to that time, you might walk through a cold European valley and see a group of Neanderthals huddled around a fire. They are broad-shouldered, their faces heavy and strong, their hands thick with muscle. They speak in deep, short sounds, and their eyes glint with intelligence. Far away, on a small island in Indonesia, a completely different kind of human lives quietly in the forest. Tiny beings barely a meter tall, with small skulls but skillful hands. We now call them Homo floresiensis, the hobbits of prehistory. To the north, high in the icy mountains of Siberia, another species, the Denisovans, survives in caves, leaving behind only a few fragments of bone and teeth. Their faces are lost to time, but their DNA still flows in the blood of millions of people today. And somewhere in Africa, our own ancestors, Homo sapiens, were preparing to leave their homeland and cross the continents. They would soon meet these other species, and the world would never be the same again. For a brief moment in history, multiple kinds of humans coexisted on the same planet. They hunted the same animals, gathered around the same fires, and looked at the same stars. Some traded, some fought, and some loved. And from those encounters came the story of survival and extinction. Because in the end, only one species remained: us. Why did we survive when the others vanished? Was it intelligence, cooperation, or something much darker? That question leads us into the heart of the Evolutionary War, a war that shaped the destiny of humanity. To understand this evolutionary war, we first need to see the world as it once was, a vast and dangerous landscape shaped by ice, fire, and chance. Around 2 million years ago, the first true explorers of the human line, Homo erectus, began to leave Africa. They walked on 2 legs, made tools from stone, and used fire to survive the nights. Over thousands of generations, their descendants spread across the world. Some settled in Asia, others in Europe, adapting to climates and environments so different that, over time, they became entirely new species. By 300,000 years ago, the planet was home to multiple branches of the human family. Each evolved in isolation, molded by the land that raised them. In Africa, our direct ancestors, Homo sapiens, developed lighter bodies, sharper minds, and something revolutionary: imagination. In Europe, the Neanderthals were thriving, tough, intelligent, and remarkably human in many ways. In Asia, Denisovans adapted to cold mountain air, their genes helping modern Tibetans survive high altitudes even today. And on remote islands like Flores and Luzon, small-bodied humans, Homo floresiensis and Homo luzonensis, evolved, living quietly, cut off from the rest of the world. The stage was set for a drama unlike any other, not of nations or empires, but of species. Archaeology gives us glimpses of how these species lived. In Shanidar Cave in Iraq, Neanderthals buried their dead with flowers, a sign of compassion and symbolic thought. In Blombos Cave in South Africa, early Homo sapiens carved abstract patterns on ochre stones, perhaps the first art in history. In Denisova Cave in Siberia, scientists discovered a single child's bone, half Neanderthal, half Denisovan, proof that these species didn't just coexist, they intermingled. But coexistence didn't mean harmony. For tens of thousands of years, climate chaos reshaped the Earth. Ice ages came and went, forests turned to deserts, and food became scarce. Whenever one environment collapsed, species were forced to move. And when they moved, they met each other. Some encounters were peaceful, involving trade or shared knowledge. Others were brutal. Competition for land, shelter, and resources became inevitable. This was not a war in the modern sense. No armies, no battlefields. But it was a struggle written in the survival of genes. Every time a Homo sapiens group replaced another species in a region, every time one bloodline vanished while another grew, the evolutionary balance shifted. Scientists still debate what exactly happened. Did Homo sapiens outcompete the others because of superior tools, language, and cooperation? Or did we bring disease, invisible weapons that wiped out our cousins before they could adapt? Perhaps it wasn't just skill, but the ability to imagine, to plan, to lie, to believe, that gave us an edge. Genetic studies reveal that the story isn't one of total conquest. If you are of European descent, about 2% of your DNA comes from Neanderthals. If your ancestors came from Oceania or Southeast Asia, you might carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. These traces show that, far from being separate, our species intertwined in complex ways, blending, merging, and reshaping each other over millennia. And yet, by 40,000 years ago, every other human species had disappeared. The Neanderthals vanished from Europe. The Denisovans faded into the shadows of Siberia. The tiny island species were gone, leaving behind nothing but tools and bones. Only we remained, Homo sapiens, the wise human. But this victory came at a cost. When we look into the empty caves where Neanderthals once lived, or the fossilized footprints of children on an ancient shore, we're reminded that we were not the only version of humanity that could have existed. Perhaps somewhere in that lost diversity lay paths of evolution we will never see. Minds that thought differently, cultures that might have created their own art, music, or even civilization. The archaeological record is like a fragmented memory, scattered bones, burned stones, and ancient whispers. Yet through it, we begin to see the shape of a forgotten era, a time when humanity was plural, not singular. And as we reconstruct that lost world, one truth becomes clear. Our rise was not just a story of progress. It was a story of competition, adaptation, and perhaps elimination. The evolutionary war was not fought in a day. It unfolded over hundreds of thousands of years, a slow, relentless contest where the weapon was not always strength, but imagination. It's that imagination, our ability to dream, to fear, to unite under shared symbols, that may have made us both the victors and the inheritors of a lost world. Because even today, inside every one of us, small fragments of those vanished species remain, silent witnesses of a time when being human was not unique, but shared. Let us return now to that ancient world, a time before history, before civilization, when the earth was still divided among multiple kinds of humans. Imagine standing in a valley somewhere in Ice Age Europe. The air is sharp and cold. A thin mist moves between frozen pines. In the distance, smoke rises from a small fire, a Neanderthal camp. Their stone tools are scattered on the ground, and the sound of scraping hides echoes softly through the wind. These people are not beasts. They speak, gesture, laugh, and mourn. They hunt mammoths, stitch clothes from fur, and build shelters from bones and wood. Their eyes hold intelligence, a kind that mirrors our own. Yet something is different. Their groups are small and isolated. Their tools change little over time. Their art is simple, their communication limited. For tens of thousands of years they live in balance with nature, but they do not seem to transform it. Then, one day, strangers appear. From the south come the Homo sapiens, thinner, quicker, carrying with them new tools and strange symbols. They bring painted stones, carved bone needles, necklaces of shells, and most importantly, language. Not the broken sounds of warning or desire, but a system capable of sharing imagination, dreams, and plans. With words, Homo sapiens can unite dozens, even hundreds, under a single idea. They can organize hunts, coordinate tribes, pass down myths. For the first time, a species can imagine something that doesn't exist, a god, a law, a future. That power changes everything. At first, the Neanderthals and sapiens may have avoided each other. Archaeological sites show long periods where both occupied the same regions, sometimes even the same caves, but at different times, like ghosts passing each other in the night. Then the encounters began. Some ended in conflict, others in love. In caves across France and Spain, layers of occupation suggest a slow displacement. Wherever Homo sapiens arrived, Neanderthal populations began to shrink. But in genetic records, traces of interbreeding appear, suggesting that the boundary between us and them was not as clear as we once thought. It wasn't a single war. No final battle, no moment of victory. Instead, it was a long replacement, tribe by tribe, valley by valley. Our ancestors brought not only sharper tools, but a different kind of mind, one capable of creating complex social structures and adapting to rapid change. Neanderthals were incredibly strong, but in the long run, strength could not match flexibility. In Africa, Homo sapiens had learned to survive dramatic swings in climate, droughts, floods, the unpredictable violence of the Ice Age. This forced them to cooperate, innovate, and move constantly. When they entered Europe and Asia, they brought those survival instincts with them. Adaptability became their greatest weapon. Meanwhile, the Neanderthals had mastered a specific environment: cold forests and plains. When the Ice Age ended and the climate shifted, their hunting strategies and diets failed to adjust fast enough. To them, the world changed too quickly. To Homo sapiens, it was an opportunity. The contrast between the two species was not about intelligence alone, but about cognitive diversity. Where Neanderthals saw the world as it was, sapiens imagined what it could be. This difference birthed what we now call culture. Evidence from sites like Chauvet Cave and Lascaux reveals early sapiens painting animals in motion: horses, lions, bison, not just as they appeared, but as symbols, as stories. Meanwhile, Neanderthal art was simpler, more direct, beautiful, but without abstraction. In that difference, between recording reality and imagining beyond it, lay the seed of human dominance. Some anthropologists call this the cognitive revolution. It wasn't about better tools, but better thinking. A mind that could form alliances, trade across distances, share myths, and build trust among strangers. A Homo sapiens could walk into a new tribe and say, "We share the same God," or "We follow the same story." That invisible bond turned small groups into nations. The Neanderthals never stood a chance. Yet it would be a mistake to think of them as inferior. In many ways, they were victims of circumstance, caught between climate shifts, diseases, and the arrival of a rival species with a new kind of intelligence. If the Ice Age had lasted longer, perhaps they would have survived instead of us. In recent years, scientists have found more and more evidence that Neanderthals were far more advanced than once believed. They created pigments, decorated shells, cared for their injured, and even used herbal medicine. Their brains were as large as ours, perhaps even larger. So if they were intelligent and resourceful, why did they vanish? Some researchers suggest it wasn't competition that doomed them, but assimilation. Over time, Neanderthal populations mixed with Homo sapiens until their distinct traits faded. In other words, they didn't entirely disappear. They became part of us. When you touch your face, you might be touching a Neanderthal feature: a broad nose, a strong brow, a stocky frame. When you take a breath in the mountains, a Denisovan gene may be helping your lungs work better. We are not pure. We are a mosaic, the living memory of a world once shared. Still, something about Homo sapiens made us unstoppable. Within just a few thousand years, we spread from Africa to every corner of the planet, crossing deserts, oceans, and ice. No other human species had ever done that. It was as if, after millions of years of slow evolution, a spark had ignited. and one branch of the human tree caught fire. That fire would build civilizations, invent gods, and reshape the earth. But it also left ashes, the silent remains of all the others who once walked beside us. The first half of this story ends not with victory, but with a question. Was the rise of Homo sapiens inevitable, or simply a matter of luck? The deeper scientists dig into the earth, the more this story of coexistence begins to blur the line between us and them. For decades, we thought human evolution was a simple ladder, from ape to Homo habilis to erectus to sapiens. But today, we know that was a myth. It wasn't a ladder. It was a tangled tree with many branches growing, overlapping, and eventually vanishing. And for a time, many of those branches were alive at once. If we could look at the world 100,000 years ago from above, it would look almost like a planet divided into kingdoms of humanity. In Africa, Homo sapiens were refining their tools and creating ornaments. In Europe, Neanderthals ruled the frozen plains. In Asia, Denisovans adapted to mountains and forests. In Indonesia, the tiny Homo floresiensis lived in isolation, untouched by the outside world. And deep in the Philippines, a newly discovered species, Homo luzonensis, quietly carved its own path. Each species was a unique experiment in survival. Each one found a way to be human, differently. But survival was not only about strength or intelligence, it was also about luck, environment, and connection. A single volcanic eruption, a drought, or a wave of disease could erase a species in a century. When the Toba supervolcano erupted around 74,000 years ago, ash spread across continents. The skies darkened, plants died, and entire populations perished. Some researchers believe this catastrophe nearly wiped out early Homo sapiens, leaving fewer than 10,000 survivors. We were fragile too, yet somehow we recovered. And as we spread, our encounters with other humans reshaped us genetically and culturally. When Homo sapiens met Neanderthals in the Middle East, interbreeding occurred. It wasn't an isolated event. It happened repeatedly, across thousands of years. Children of mixed ancestry likely carried traits that helped survival: stronger immune systems, better cold tolerance, and more resilient skin. Evolution wasn't a clean replacement, it was absorption through connection. However, not all scientists agree on this peaceful picture. Some evidence points to violent competition. In sites where both species' tools appear together, Neanderthal layers often vanish abruptly after the arrival of Homo sapiens. Stone weapons evolve suddenly, sharper, lighter, deadlier. Some anthropologists describe this as technological aggression, one species overpowering another not by strength, but by innovation. Then there's the question of language and thought. Could Neanderthals speak like us? Most likely, yes. They had the same vocal anatomy and a version of the FOXP2 gene linked to speech. But language is more than sound. It's shared imagination. Homo sapiens used language to weave stories, myths, and beliefs that united groups beyond bloodlines. Neanderthals may have spoken, but they did not storytell. And storytelling is what allowed sapiens to imagine a future, to build plans bigger than individuals. Other theories are more tragic. Some scientists suggest Homo sapiens brought with them new pathogens, diseases that spread quickly through Neanderthal populations with no immunity. Just as smallpox would later decimate indigenous Americans after European contact, viruses could have silently done the same 50,000 years ago. No battles, no massacres, just invisible death. And yet, even if competition and disease played roles, something subtler was at work: the ability to adapt socially. Homo sapiens formed wide, interconnected networks. Artifacts from prehistoric Africa show seashell beads traded hundreds of kilometers inland, proof of early trade routes. Neanderthal artifacts, in contrast, rarely traveled far from their source. Our ancestors built webs of cooperation. Theirs lived in clusters of isolation. That difference, connection versus isolation, may have sealed their fate. But extinction did not come overnight. The last Neanderthals in southern Spain survived until about 39,000 years ago. On islands, small populations of Homo floresiensis and Homo luzonensis may have lived even longer, perhaps until 30,000 years ago, maybe later. Imagine that. When our ancestors were painting caves in France, other humans were still alive somewhere on distant islands. Each disappearance marked a thinning of human diversity. For millions of years, evolution had allowed multiple kinds of human to exist, each shaped by its environment. But after this period, only one remained. For the first time in history, the human world became monochrome. And that brings us to a haunting question. Was that a good thing? Anthropologists still debate whether the dominance of Homo sapiens was a sign of progress or the start of decline. Yes, we survived. We invented art, science, language, and technology. But in doing so, we may have silenced other voices of humanity, minds that might have thought differently, created differently, dreamed differently. Imagine a world where Neanderthals had survived, where two intelligent species shared the planet. Would we have learned cooperation instead of conquest? Would we have respected the Earth more deeply, knowing it was not ours alone? There are signs that not all was lost. Within our genes, the past still whispers. Neanderthal DNA influences our immune systems, our skin, even how we process sunlight. Denisovan DNA helps modern Tibetans breathe in thin air. In other words, they are still here, inside us. But their cultures, their songs, their ways of seeing the world, those are gone forever. The Evolutionary War was not a battle of good versus evil, nor of progress versus stagnation. It was simply nature's experiment, unfolding over time. We won, yes, but perhaps not because we were better, only because we were different enough to survive change, and yet deep inside, our bodies remember that ancient coexistence. Our blood carries its proof. Every time we gaze at the stars, wonder about our origins, or search for meaning, we are, in some sense, continuing the dream of all humans who ever lived, not just our kind. The war ended long ago, but the story never did. Because the question remains, what truly makes us human? Our strength, our intelligence, or our imagination? The same imagination that, long ago, may have destroyed the others, and yet keeps us endlessly searching for who we are. When we look back at this long and tangled story of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo sapiens, we're not just studying bones and tools. We are, in truth, studying ourselves. Every fossil unearthed, every ancient DNA sequence decoded, is a fragment of a far greater mirror, one that reflects what it truly means to be human. Because the story of evolution is not a story of domination. It is a story of fragility, adaptation, and choice. Our ancestors didn't win simply because they were the smartest or strongest. They survived because they could cooperate, imagine, and change faster than anyone else. In that sense, evolution never ended. It continues, not in our bones, but in our minds, our cultures, and our technology. Each generation faces new forms of the same ancient war, the struggle to adapt or vanish. When the Ice Age froze the Earth, humans learned to control fire. When the mammoths disappeared, they learned to domesticate animals. When food ran short, they began to plant seeds, creating agriculture. Every crisis was a test, and every test demanded imagination. That same pattern still defines us today. We may no longer face saber-toothed cats or glacial storms, but we face new evolutionary pressures: climate change, artificial intelligence, genetic manipulation, and even the possibility of colonizing other planets. And the question remains exactly the same. Will we adapt wisely or repeat the mistakes of the past? If the prehistoric record teaches us anything, it's that no species is guaranteed survival. Neanderthals once ruled Europe. Denisovans mastered the cold. Homo floresiensis thrived in isolation. Each thought their world would last forever, until it didn't. Their disappearance is not just ancient history. It's a warning written in stone. Perhaps their greatest gift to us isn't their DNA, but their silence. A reminder that nature does not negotiate with arrogance. Adaptation is not a right. It is earned every single day. And maybe that's why we're so obsessed with finding them. Every time scientists uncover a new species of human, in a cave, a jawbone, a sliver of DNA, the discovery electrifies us. Not because we're finding them, but because we're rediscovering us. Each new branch of the human tree reminds us that we were never destined to stand alone. We came from diversity. We survived through cooperation. And yet, in modern times, we've built societies that often forget those lessons. We divide ourselves by nation, by belief, by skin color, as if different means threat. But in prehistory, difference was the very thing that saved us. When groups of humans shared tools, knowledge, and genes, they became stronger. When they closed themselves off, they vanished. That pattern hasn't changed. The same ancient law applies. Those who share survive. Those who isolate disappear. Think of Homo sapiens as the ultimate collaborator, a species built on connection. Our art, our languages, our stories, they are all ways to synchronize minds. When we imagine together, we create civilizations. When we imagine alone, we fall back into extinction's shadow. This reflection gives new meaning to the so-called evolutionary war. It was never simply about species competing. It was about the emergence of empathy, communication, and shared purpose. And yet, there's a darker side too. The same imagination that helped us survive also gave birth to conflict, warfare, and domination. When early humans began to think abstractly, they learned to draw lines. Us versus them, tribe versus tribe. Maybe the evolutionary war never really ended. It simply changed its weapons. Every time humanity turns against itself, we echo that ancient moment, when one form of human pushed another toward extinction. Every genocide, every war, every act of hate is a small reenactment of that primal pattern. But there's another way to see it. Maybe the true victory of Homo sapiens wasn't in eliminating the others, but in becoming many within one, carrying their blood, their genes, their instincts, and their memories forward. Inside us lives the strength of Neanderthals, the resilience of Denisovans, the curiosity of all those who came before. To be human, then, is to be plural. We are not a single species frozen in time. We are a chorus of extinct voices still speaking through us, in our bones, in our dreams, in our endless desire to understand where we come from. And perhaps that's the deepest lesson of all. Our survival depends not only on our intelligence, but on our ability to remember, to carry forward the wisdom of the past. Just as our ancestors once adapted to ice and fire, we must now adapt to the new forces we've unleashed: technology, climate, and ourselves. Will we learn to coexist with artificial intelligence as we once did with other humans? Will we extend empathy beyond our tribe, our species, our planet? Or will the next chapter of evolution repeat the same story? Another war, this time between creator and creation. The fossils cannot answer that. But perhaps if we listen closely, the echo of prehistory still whispers the truth. Evolution rewards not the strongest nor the cleverest, but those who can imagine a shared future. And that, more than anything else, is the heritage of the Evolutionary War. Not destruction, but transformation. Not survival of the fittest, but survival of the most connected. Because from the moment we first met another kind of human in a dark forest, the question that has defined us has never really changed. Can we live together, or must one always disappear? For most of human history, we were never alone. That is the truth buried beneath mountains of earth and thousands of generations of forgetting. We shared the planet with others who were like us, thinking, feeling, dreaming beings, until one by one, they disappeared. The Neanderthals in their frozen valleys, the Denisovans in their mountain caves, the hobbits in their forested islands, all gone. Their bones have turned to dust, but their echoes remain in our cells, our memories, our stories. And yet, if we look carefully, their presence still lingers, not as ghosts, but as living proof that humanity was never meant to be one form. We are a collage of survivors. Every breath we take carries whispers of those ancient cousins who once walked beside us. The so-called Evolutionary War was not simply a contest for existence. It was the world testing different versions of humanity. And we are its outcome, its final experiment. For now. But that doesn't make us the chosen species. It makes us the responsible one. Because survival alone is not triumph. If evolution selected us for imagination, then imagination must be used wisely, not to conquer, but to understand. The same mind that once painted mammoths on cave walls can now split atoms, terraform worlds, or destroy itself entirely. We have inherited the creative fire that ended the age of many humans. The question now is whether that fire will sustain us or consume us. In the silence of ancient caves, our ancestors once carved symbols that outlived them by tens of thousands of years. They were trying to say something, to themselves, to their children, to us. Maybe it was this, that the story of being human is not finished. We are still evolving, not in bones, but in spirit, in knowledge, in empathy. Each discovery, a fossil, a painting, a gene, is a reminder that evolution's greatest mystery isn't how we began, but what we choose to become next. When scientists hold a Neanderthal skull, they are not holding a relic of failure. They are holding a mirror, a reflection of a path not taken, a version of ourselves that almost was. Perhaps the most haunting realization is that we did not merely inherit the earth, we inherited their unfinished dreams. So when you look at your own hands, remember, they are not only yours, they are the hands of every human who came before, those who lit the first fire, those who crossed frozen seas, those who vanished into legend. And within those hands lies the same question that has guided our species since the beginning. Can we evolve beyond survival into wisdom? If we can, then perhaps the Evolutionary War was not a tragedy after all, but the beginning of a far greater story, the awakening of a mind capable of understanding its own past. So the next time you gaze at the night sky, think of them, the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, the forgotten ones, for somewhere in those stars lies the destiny they never reached, but we still might, because the story of evolution is not about who won, it's about who remembers. And in remembering, we keep them alive. Do we really know everything about our ancestors, or have we only just begun to uncover the truth about ourselves? If this journey through the forgotten branches of humanity moved you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. Join us again as we continue exploring the ancient secrets buried beneath our very existence, one mystery at a time.